Hi guys, we're the triple option, and we're three high school kids who are bored of quarantine life, and we just wanted to talk about sports. So, my name is Sujal Boba.
My name is Anish Arbati.
And my name's AJ Nanda.
So today we're going to be recapping the draft, especially the wide receivers class. And so first we have the top three wide receivers in the class. We have Jerry Jeudy of the Broncos, Henry Ruggs of the Raiders, and CeeDee Lamb of the Dallas Cowboys.
Now, obviously these are three of the top picks, the first three taken off the board, but it's just a matter of opinion who you think are the top three in the draft. Like, I know some people had Justin Jefferson better than Henry Ruggs, but these are the three that were most popular amongst people, I guess, in the 2020 class.
And so we had each of our best selections. And so AJ and Sujal picked Jerry Jeudy of the Broncos, and I picked CeeDee Lamb of the Dallas Cowboys.
So I think Sujal made some good points about Jerry Jeudy, so I'm going to let him talk about him more.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so Jerry Jeudy, in my opinion, he was the best wide receiver in the class, and the Broncos should have been celebrating that he fell to 15th. They were considering trading up for him, and the fact that he fell to 15th, there's so many needy teams that were available. You had the Broncos, you had the Niners who would have taken a wide receiver, you had the Jets potentially taking a wide receiver. The Jaguars could have taken a wide receiver. The Cardinals were a sleeper team for taking a wide receiver, but they didn't. But the best wide receiver falling to 15th, that's pretty good. And I feel he's gonna do really good in the Broncos because he's playing next to an amazing wide receiver core and tight end core. They have Cortland Sutton. He's going to his third year. He's a very underrated player. I think he made the Pro Bowl last year. He had great stats last year. And the thing about Jeudy is he's basically got everything. He's got the speed. He's got the separation. He's obviously the best route runner in the class. I mean, you could watch hours and hours of film on this guy's route running, and it would not get boring. And the thing about his route running is he isn't choppy at all. There's no wasted motion. Like, he doesn't stutter too many times when he's doing a comeback. He just hits the route full stride, and that's what makes him a great route runner. And he's not a contested catch guy, but he doesn't really need to be because you already have Cortland Sutton. He's like a big, strong guy. And he also won't get all the attention because he's Cortland Sutton. Cortland, number one receiver. And JD will probably be the number two. Also has KJ Hamler will be in number three. So JD will be going up against number two and number three cornerbacks, not like the top cornerback of each team. And this is obviously going to make it easier for him to produce. And the thing is, when he played in Alabama, Jeudy was the one that got all the attention. He was the one that was playing number one cornerbacks. And then Ruggs took the number two cornerbacks. But then since now you have Sutton taking the number one, and you're gonna have Jeudy one-on-one with the number two and number three cornerback, and he can easily create separation. And his production, I expect it to be really good.
So adding on to what Sujal said about Jerry Jeudy, I think definitely his route running, but more so is after the catch skills. This guy catches the ball and just goes with it. He takes it to the house. And I find that no other receiver in this class has that ability. He's very elusive in the open field. He makes defenders miss. And the one thing I feel like Jerry Jeudy showed in his college film, which wasn't amazing, is that some of these deeper balls he struggled to haul in. And he would like there was a game I think against Ole Miss where he dropped a ball right into his hands and it was probably like 50 yards or something. So obviously he struggles with that sometimes, but I think that can be solved once he gets his chemistry with Locke going. Obviously, due to the coronavirus, there's no OTAs and he's not getting to spend as much time as he wants to with Drew Lock. But I think once these two develop chemistry, Jerry Jeudy's ceiling is really high. Now, the other thing is I don't think Jerry Jeudy's necessarily a better football player than CeeDee Lamb. I think both have their strengths, but I think like CeeDee Lamb is very good in the air. He can go up and get those balls. Jerry Judy's not necessarily the best at that, but I think Jerry Judy is overall more polished in his route running and is more pro ready than CeeDee Lamb.
I'm gonna have to disagree with that because when you look at CeeDee Lamb, he has the height of many of the NFL wide receivers in the NFL. Like Devontae Adams, he's 6'1", DeAndre Hopkins, he's 6'1", and CeeDee Lamb is 6'2". So I think that correlates more. Jerry Judy's also pretty tall, but I think the target size of CeeDee Lamb is way bigger and better for NFL than Jerry Judy. And like when you talk about his weight, he's 198 pounds, which is kind of slim. But you look at Judy, who's in the low 190s, and then you look at the NFL wide receivers in who are like the top, like Devontae Adams is 216 pounds, DeAndre Hopkins is 214 pounds. And when you look at that, you want a bigger target for the NFL. I mean, you look at Julio Jones and like DeAndre Hopkins, they're all big targets who can get you big receptions and yards. And so when you look at the stats, he had 62 receptions for 1,327 yards in his last year of college at Oklahoma. And he's very good at deep footwork. I'd say he's better than Jerry Judy at deep footwork. He's good at finding spaces between the zones. So like that's very good because you have Amari Cooper lining up on the other side of you, and then he breaks many tackles. He cuts through defenses. He has very high IQ. He's super elusive. He has impressive jukes. He angles his route running to create like a half man relationship so that it's not a full tackle, but it's like a half tackle. And then he's very good at adjusting to the ball. He only dropped 3 passes out of 88 balls, so he caught 85 out of 88. And I think he can be a top wide receiver in the NFL. He's very smooth with his feet. He has elite body control. He catches the ball very well. He has like vacuum hands, as I say. He's very dynamic. He runs very well after the catch, and he's very good in the slot. And I think he can be an impact starter. And I compare him to Devontae Adams and DeAndre Hopkins as a ceiling because these are top wide receivers. They have the similar size to him. He has better size than Judy. Judy's blocking, in my opinion, is very bad. He needs more strength off the in the pro game to become a good or average run blocker. And I think the Dallas Cowboys are getting a stud out of this draft pick, and I'm surprised he fell so far. And do you guys have any oppositions to what I
So
think?
I
Yeah,
actually,
sort of.
I'll let
Well,
Sujal talk.
yeah. Judy, he played in a much harder division than CD Lamb. He consistently went against top, and CD Lamb, he played lower level competition. So how do you think that he'll adjust to that in the NFL? Because
No, I
like,
actually want to add on to that. I actually want to point out that a lot of these top corners in the NFL come from the SEC, and Jerry Judy
exactly.
consistently smoked those cornerbacks. So I don't see how. I understand CeeDee Lamb. That's still a tough conference to play in. They're both Power Five conferences, but the SEC cornerbacks. Like even look at this year's draft. You have he was on the same team as Trevon Diggs. He went against Christian Fulton a few times. These are two of the top corners in this draft, and he won it. He was much better than these two in a matchup. So that's why I think also Jerry Judy is a better player than CeeDee Lamb because Jerry Judy has the experience of going against the NFL cornerbacks kind of breed.
Well, I think CeeDee Lamb, I think his just like size and versatility can translate to any team that he plays against. I mean, most of the corners are from the SEC, but there are other cornerbacks who are really like top level that he smoked in his division as well. And I think that just saying like that the SEC is like the best division and like Jerry Judy smoked them all, but CeeDee Lamb can't smoke them. I'm just saying that CeeDee Lamb has better height, better weight, better size and versatility to actually translate his game from college to the NFL.
No, one thing I actually want to say is I think it's kind of misleading CeeDee Lamb's size because their heights. CeeDee Lamb is 6'2", Jerry Judy's 6'1". There's only a 1-inch difference, but just the whole aerial play that he can go up and get those balls is what really, I feel like, makes him seem like a lot bigger than Jerry Judy. But realistically, they're almost identical in build. These are two very similar built players, and I think they have two different skill sets, and it's fair to agree to disagree that their best selection, that either one of them can be the best selection in this draft based on what you're looking for in a wide receiver.
Yeah, to add on, like they have the same physical attributes, except they have different ways of using it. Like Judy's speciality is separation, so he has no need to go up for the deep balls. But CD Lamb, he's more of like the big play, the highlight reel type catches. But Judy will wow you with his technique. He'll create separation in an instant, and you don't need to have all those like athletic, spectacular catches if you're already like wide open. So, yeah.
Either way, I think both of these franchises are getting an amazing wide receiver for their franchise. And so moving on to the sleeper selection, AJ had KJ Hamler of the Broncos, Sujal had Denzel Mims of the New York Jets, and I had Michael Pittman Jr. of the Indianapolis Colts.
So first off, I just want to say, for me, what a sleeper selection is. I think a sleeper can go in the first round, the second round, the third round, but it's a player who was not expected to get picked, I guess, by that team at that point, but has definitely shown that they can be special for this team and that this draft pick might be worth it down the line. So I think Anisha's example of Michael Pittman is a really good example, so I'm going to let him talk about that first.
Yeah, you look at this guy, he's 6'4". You compare him to other wide receivers, like he's much taller than all the wide receivers, as I mentioned. Devontae Adams 6'1", DeAndre Hopkins 6'1". But like for me, I compare him to like Mike Evans type, 6'5", 225 pounds, but he's 223 pounds. So I view him as similar builds. And you just look at his stats. He has 1,275 yards and 11 touchdowns in his last season at USC. And then he's very good at one-on-one balls. He gets all those 50-50 balls and he translates them to 80-20 balls just because of his size. He's very good at contested catches. He has very good yards after catch. He's consistent and his game is on the rise. I think he can be much better than what he showed us at USC. He has amazing attitude. He performed well without a top QB like other wide receivers in college, and I think he has very good physical attributes, very good athleticism. He's a super good run blocker. He has excellent tracking ability. He's a really good red zone threat. I mean, you just look at his size. I mean, why wouldn't you have like a stud in this guy? And then you have he's a good X receiver for the Colts, and I think he could be a very good option for Philip Rivers because you never know with T.Y. Hilton. He's been battling injuries for so long. I think that this guy could be like their franchise wide receiver. I mean, he's going to an injury-riddled wide receiver core. I mean, they drafted Paris Campbell last year. So like you still have a young wide receiver core, but Hilton is 31 years old. And I think using his size and attributes to his advantage, he has a huge catch radius, and he has underrated deep ball ability, and he has long strides, and he's efficient as a route runner. I see him as a Mike Evans type player. Both are going to be both have faced bad QB situations in his past. I mean, you look at Rivers, you're going to have maybe like a good 3 to 4 years left of Philip Rivers before his end. And I think after that, you're going to have a little bit of QB situation, just like Mike Evans had up until now with Tom Brady and Gronk and Chris Godwin and all the Tampa Bay wide receivers and receiving core. And I think he's adjusting and he will still perform at a high level like Mike Evans. And I think he has an amazing potential to be the wide receiver and franchise wide receiver for this franchise. And I think they kind of got a steal with this, and he's my sleeper selection. And I'm very excited to see what this man can bring to the Indianapolis Colts, and I'm excited.
Yeah, following the order in which they drafted, actually, AJ, why don't you talk about KJ?
Okay, so for me, KJ Hamler, why I think a lot of people question this pick mostly because obviously the Broncos got Jerry Jeudy in the first round, so it's like doubling up on wide receivers. But a lot of people also were like, oh, the Broncos, cornerback, they need a cornerback. And the cornerbacks available at that time included Jalen Johnson, Trevon Diggs, and even Christian Fulton, three guys who really solid cornerbacks in their college careers. But I think the thing about KJ Hamler, which is why I think the Broncos picked him, is he there's a story actually about this. The John Elway and Vic Fangio, Broncos head coach and general manager respectively, they actually went to a Penn State game to see KJ Hamler to scout him, and they saw him on a kick return. They decided, okay, let's time this kid's 40-yard dash. Okay, just like on a 100-yard kick return, how far is he? What's his 40 time at any point? And one really interesting thing is that they were hand timing, right? So obviously it was a bit off, but 3.9 something. They had a sub 40-yard dash on this guy, and that is what it's really surprising to me. Obviously, he did not run a sub 4. That's very fast, but it still shows that he does have elite speed as a kick returner, and his unofficial 40-yard dash is a 4.32. And I think why I say this is a sleeper is because this gives the Broncos their speed wide receiver. Okay, they had Jerry Jeudy, he's pretty fast, but this is their like I might say Tyreek Hill of the Denver Broncos because he can stretch that field with that speed. Now, his main issue in college was drops. Okay, he dropped 17% of his passes, which is a lot, and I think, and part of that is due to the fact that he had different quarterbacks at Penn State, and he didn't get chemistry. So I think same thing with Judy, once he gets chemistry with the lock, both can fix this dropping balls habit. And in a lot of ways, I see KJ Hamler as Hollywood Brown, who's on the Ravens, Marquise Brown as he's known, and he had 7 touchdowns as a rookie, and he went 25th overall last year as one of the highest wide receivers picked. And I think this guy has all the same traits as Marquise Brown. He can be like Marquise Brown and just be that guy for the Broncos they need in the slot right now, and to really take on the Chiefs in that division.
Lastly, we have Sujal talking about Denzel Mims from Baylor.
Yeah, so Denzel Mims, the thing why I thought he was a sleeper pick was he was picked so late. Like he was picked overall by the Jets. Like this guy was a highly tutored prospect. People on a Green Bay in the first round, or potentially even San Francisco in the first round, but he fell all the way there. And if you take a look at his stats from 2019, 66 receptions, 1,020 yards, 15.5 yards per catch, and he had 12 touchdowns. And if you look at this guy's measurables, they're crazy. 33 inch and 33 and 7/8 inch arms. He's 6'3". He ran a 4.38 40-yard dash. He had a 38.5 vertical. And he's 96 percentile on 40 in speed. And for like a big guy, that's really good. Like he has speed for a big guy. And his catch radius is easy. It's incredible. He has huge hands. He will be able to bring any ball in. His a huge red zone target, and his body build is great. He's very, very strong. He was actually a track star, so that goes to for the show that he is athletic for such a big person. His main specialty is getting those 50-50 balls, but when asked to create plays after the catch, he can do that. He can create some big plays out of nothing. He's also a good back shoulder target. He has the physicality to become a blocker. And the main problem maybe that's why he was he could not separate in press coverage. But I feel like with proper coaching, he'll be able to easily get past that barrier. And he has all the physical tools that you want. And the thing about this pick is that he's going to the Jets. And the worst wide receiver tight end core in the NFL belongs to the Jets because they have no one. I'm surprised they let go of Robbie Anderson, Quincy and Nunez out for the season. And Darnold will not have anyone to throw to but Mims. Obviously, that means number one cornerbacks are also going to pay more attention to him, but he's going to rack up targets like crazy. He's like the one guy that he'll be Darnold's security blanket. And I feel like he'll be able to, the coaching will be good enough there for him to separate from press coverage and make those big plays. And I think the run blocking is another very important part because the Jets have Le'Veon Bell. Obviously, they also signed Frank Gore. The run blocking is very important for the Jets because they're probably going to be a run-oriented team, with especially with the lack of wide receivers and tight ends. So overall, I think he's going to have a huge impact on the Jets, and that's why he's my favorite sleeper selection of the draft.
Okay, so I actually do also want to talk about Denzel Mims because I really like this guy. And if there was any receiver I expected to go in the first round that didn't, it was Denzel Mims because he's like what 6'4", I think you said, Sujal. He's very tall, so I was expecting him to be like that Randy Moss kind of guy for any team he goes to. And the thing about Mims, which I find really that makes him a sleeper, is you have to look at the guys taken ahead of him. Not in the first round necessarily. I think the first round was fine, the receivers taken, but I think second round wide receivers, you had T. Higgins go. I think Mims is a little bit worse than T. Higgins as far as T. Higgins was much more proven in college. Michael Pittman, I think he's a little better than Mims. But going down the line, Laviska Shenault, KJ Hamler, Chase Claypool, Van Jefferson, these four guys, I don't think they're better than Denzel Mims. I think Denzel Mims is a much better player than these four guys. And I think most notably in the Pittsburgh Steelers at pick 49 and the Los Angeles Rams at pick 57, both of these teams could have taken Mims, but they decided to take Claypool and Van Jefferson. And I think it's okay. Like they're both, all three of them are good players, but I really expected Mims to go a bit higher in the second round than these other wide receivers.
Yeah, to be honest, all these sleepers are really good sleeper selections. I can't really say in my opinion that Denzel Mims was the best sleeper selection because of where he was drafted. But all three of these guys in any other they would have probably gone in the first round. They just happened this 2020 NFL draft had uh, one of the best receiver classes ever in history. That's what scouts have been saying. And I wanted to add something onto Michael Pittman. He said he's a huge 50-50 ball guy. And the thing is, he can win at all three levels. He can take a short pass to the house. He can he understands zone very well. He understands it like a veteran. He knows where to sit and the routes and the QB. And he also has great deep ball tracking. He can high point the ball amazingly. And the thing, Rivers, throughout his career, he's played with guys like Vincent Jackson or Mike Williams, like the guys he can just chuck up a high ball to, and they'll be with the ball. And this is exactly who Pittman is, and that's why I think this is probably one of the most perfect fits in the draft ever. I mean, sorry, not ever, but in this year, when scouts were asked to name a perfect fit, Michael Pittman and the Colts, that's one of them. So that's why I think Pittman's also going to be a star.
Yeah, I agree. So moving on, we have the questionable selection. So questionable selection is like, why did this team pick him when other players who are better than him are on the board? And so I'm going to start it off with Jalen Rieger out of TCU. And so I was really confused by this pick. I mean, this guy's 5'11", 195 pounds. He's a short wide receiver. Stats aren't even that good from TCU. 43 receptions, 611 yards, 5 touchdowns. I mean, you look at this guy, he's playing in a lower division than other wide receivers like Michael Pittman Jr., T. Higgins, who were both drafted after him. And I see that he has vertical receiving. He's very fast. He has a 4.29, 40-yard dash. And he's dynamic. He's a punt returner. He can be the Z receiver for the Eagles. And I think his weaknesses are lapses in concentration. He always looks to look ahead and go up the field too quickly. He cannot box out and fight for his position. He doesn't go to competitive schools, so competition isn't as much as from Pittman Jr. and Higgins, who are both NFL ready and better stats. And one of this is the biggest thing that I saw in his game. He has a drop rate of 16%. He had 9 drops this season. And so when you look at the Eagles, they've been ridiculed in the playoffs for Alshon Jeffrey dropping that pass in the playoffs. And I think when you look at the Eagles, they wanted a receiver who they could count on for their catches and not drops. And so I think the fit for this is completely off. I mean, you look at the wide receiver core, it's a decent core, but they're known for their drops. I mean, and then now you add another wide receiver who's dropped 16% of his passes. I mean, I don't see it. And I think as I said before, you have other wide receivers, Mims, you have Pittman, you have T. Higgins, who are all better stats, who do not drop the ball as much. But then another, like you look on the bright side of things, you have Doug Peterson, one of the best coaches in the NFL, and hopefully he can develop him into like a star. I mean, he's a good wide receiver, but he has a lot to work on. I mean, obviously it was a need for the Eagles, but I think the drops cost them the playoffs, and now you're adding another player whose worst skill is drops. And then I think he's a questionable pick, and I see him as like a Golden Tate kind of player for the Eagles if he like continues to lower his drop rate. And I think overall he can be a decent wide receiver for the Eagles, but I don't see him being a star or anything like Pittman or Higgins for their respective teams. I mean, I don't understand this pick at all.
I think adding on to that, it's not that Jalen Rieger is a bad player. It's more that, at 22, the Vikings picked Justin Jefferson from LSU. He was that guy you saw during the college football playoffs just tearing apart these defenses with Joe Burrow. And I think more than anything, it's surprising that Jalen Rieger was picked over Justin Jefferson when most mock drafts from experts had Justin Jefferson going to the Eagles. Now, I do give Jalen Rieger some credit. He is kind of like, I guess if the Eagles were looking to find a smaller wide receiver, then he's perfect for them. But I think Justin Jefferson might have been better. But the thing for me about Jalen Rieger is that like Anish said, he was in a different conference than he's not in a big conference. Yeah, he's in the same conference as CD Lamb though. So Anish, in a way, you actually contradicted yourself because you said the Big 12 is a big conference, but you just said Jalen Rieger wasn't. So we'll talk about that later. But so Jalen Rieger did not go up against top corners like Justin Jefferson, and he might find a way to work with Carson Wentz because this Eagles receiving corps was just gone last year. If you think back, their starting wide receiver in the wild card round was Greg Ward, and it's just no one knows who that is. He was good for them, but he wasn't a big name. So they did need a wide receiver, and Alshon Jeffrey's coming back. He can teach that wide receiver. But I think the most questionable part about this pick is that why didn't the Eagles take Justin Jefferson when he was sitting there for them and he wasn't expected to?
Yeah. Now, AJ, you wanna add on about Brandon Ayuk out of Arizona State?
Okay, so Brandon Ayuk, same logic. Like, why would the 49ers take him when there's better players available? So he's just a little early, and I noticed in his film he struggled in this tight coverage, which a lot of the later guys didn't so much. And my main thing is he's probably at the time when he was picked, 25th overall pick, he was the third best receiver available, in my opinion, behind Higgins and Pittman. And pretty much, I think he has potential. He's a very fast guy, but I just think that he went a little too early and that the 49ers reached a little bit on this pick because I'm pretty sure they traded up to get this guy with the Vikings. So I'm sure he would have been there at 31, which is why I don't see they have to make that trade. But he can be a really good player for them, and I think he will be a very good player for them. But I just think that Michael Pittman and T. Higgins would have been a better selection for the 49ers at the time, or even Denzel Mims, like Sujal said.
Lastly, we have Ruggs out of Alabama. So, Sujal.
This was one of like the most controversial picks of the NFL. I mean, you had my main problem with this pick was that why take Ruggs when you had CD Lamb and Jerry Judy available? Like, do you really think he's going to give you a bigger impact than those two? And if you were to take measurables, but his speed is great. Obviously, he's the fastest receiver. But we've seen so many people with him out in the league. For example, is John Ross. And that's what I think comparison is. He's much more likely to be John Ross or Marquise Goodwin than he is to become a Tyreek Hill sort of guy. His hands are huge. That's a good thing. His drop rate is very, very. He has one of the best hands, and he had one of the best hands of the receiver class. But he was playing next to Jerry Jeudy, so Jerry Jeudy took all the number one cornerbacks, while Ruggs feasted on the number two, and number three cornerbacks. And Ruggs was never exactly. He was not the focal point of the offense. And he actually never had 1,000 yards or more in college. This past season, he had 746 yards. His yards per catch where it was 18.7. That's pretty good. He had 7 touchdowns. Year before, he had 11 touchdowns. But I mean, he was drafted the number one wide receiver of the Raiders. And this guy, his college production was good, but like it wasn't great. And another thing is the as far as the check down QB, his yards per attempt is very low. It was about like 6.3 or 6.6. That's like one of the lowest in the league. Ruggs can run the slant. He can take that slant to the house, but like you're not going to be running slants every single play. And Ruggs also, he's a deep field threat. He's a stretcher. And Carr's he can throw the deep ball, but he's way too hesitant to throw the deep ball. And running the would work, but Ruggs is versatile enough to do that. But then they drafted Lynn Bowden, and he's a QB wide receiver. And so basically, in Alabama, Jeudy, as I mentioned before, he took all the tension away from defensive coordinators were planning for Jerry Jeudy, not him. And Ruggs benefited from that tremendously. And now, since he's the point of the Raiders' offense, he will get all the attention from from other cornerbacks. He'll be faced up in press coverage, and he struggles in press coverage. He struggles to separate. He has the physicality, but he still needs to get coached, and he needs to refine his technique on evading press coverage. And I believe that if, say, for example, if the Raiders had already had like a number one wide receiver, for example, Antonio Brown had panned out last year, and they took Ruggs this year, that would have been a perfect fit because Antonio Brown would have been the focal point, and Ruggs would have been the number two option. But now Ruggs is the entire focal point, and I do not think he's going to be able to live up to the pressure. I mean, obviously, if the Raiders, if they're a run first team, they establish a run with Jacobs, and they establish, then they can get play action going, and Ruggs can benefit off that. But I don't think he's not the guy to thrive on the number one. He's not a number one receiver. He's not your go-to guy. He can't break tackles, stuff like I don't know, like why would you take him over Jeudy? Jeudy could be your de facto number one. CeeDee Lamb could be your de facto number one, but Ruggs has concerns. Speed. I mean, time and time again, like the NFL has proven, like speed is not everything. Like I would rather take a guy with refined technique and all the physical skills than a guy with just speed. So hopefully Ruggs turns out to be like a good pick, but as of now, I'm very skeptical. I don't think he's going to succeed.
So for me, Henry Ruggs, I think a lot of people. Okay, first of all, like you said, the number one receiver in Oakland. I think number one receiver next year is Tyrell Williams because they're still. I don't think they quite put in Ruggs as the number one, but the thing I felt about CeeDee Lamb personally for the Raiders is that he would have been their number one, and I think they needed a number one, which is why I was a little surprised they would take Ruggs over CeeDee Lamb. Obviously, there's the Al Davis model where they want to take speed guys, and Al Davis used to love speed guys, and they're doing this in tradition. But I don't think you can argue that Henry Ruggs is a better fit for the Raiders than CeeDee Lamb or any other player. And going back to your point about number two corners, and Jeudy was taking the attention. He was actually the number 3 receiver at Alabama. He was because Devonta Smith, I think he's a
Yeah,
sophomore
exactly.
last year. He was the number 2 receiver, and he was getting the number 2 corners. Ruggs was playing the slot and taking the number 3 corners, and that just shows his production wasn't amazing against number 3 corners. Yes, it's the SEC, but that still doesn't change the fact that he wasn't putting up numbers against these nickel corners or these dimes in college.
Oh yeah, so that was our draft recap for the wide receivers. Now moving on to another segment of ours called NFL Veteran QB Roulette. And so each of us picked out of these new signings of veteran QBs, we have James Winston of the Saints, Nick Foles of the Bears, Tom Brady of the Buccaneers, Philip Rivers of the Colts, Teddy Bridgewater of the Panthers, and Andy Dalton of the Dallas Cowboys. And so we basically picked our favorite QB acquisition. And so I picked Nick Foles, AJ picked Philip Rivers, and Sujal picked James Winston. And so who wants to start? I think Sujal should start.
Yeah, the thing about Jameis Winston is I've been a huge fan of him. I think like the upside is crazy for him. Obviously, it didn't work out in Tampa Bay last year. He threw for 33 touchdowns, but he also threw for 30 interceptions. But I think like now he's playing behind Drew Brees, and like who else is like a better person to learn from? Also, he had eye surgery. I mean, obviously, like it's not going to do wonders. It's not like he's going to have like, eyesight now, but I feel like that could potentially help him cut down on the interceptions. And obviously, he had amazing weapons in Tampa Bay, but the offensive line protection was not. It was not good. It was pretty bad actually, and they did not have a running game for like the entirety of his career in Tampa Bay. But now in New Orleans, you have Alvin Kamara. He's a dual threat running back. Can, catch the ball. He can run the ball, and you also have Mike Thomas, and he's top three receiver. He can run physicality, and you have Jared Cook, a really good tight end. You have that defense. That defense is really good. So especially he never had a good defense. So and the pressure was on him to deliver these timely throws, these clutch throws to make and live up to that number one QB status. But um, the thing is, in New Orleans, he does not need to. He already has that defense to carry him, and the pressure is going to be it's going to be he's not going to have as much pressure as he did in Tampa Bay. And he has a guy like Taysom Hill. He can also take some of the QB snaps for him. So I think Winston is put in the perfect place to succeed. So yeah.
Yeah, so this is my favorite QB acquisition of the whole free agency. I mean, I love this move for the Chicago Bears. I mean, you're talking about Mitchell Trubisky, who's basically thrown their whole franchise down the drain. I mean, you have a defense who was the number one defense in 2018, who led him to the wild card, and then the devastating kick by Cody Parkey. And so I think bringing in a guy who could either mentor Trubisky to basically push him to say like, oh, this is my franchise, not anyone else's. And I think lighting a fire under Mitchell Trubisky is like a great move by Pace and Nagy. And I think bringing in a Super Bowl QB who has the winning mentality to Chicago, I mean, I think that's what they need. I mean, you have a very consistent QB who obviously had injuries in Jacksonville and couldn't perform. But now you're giving him a wide receiver like Allen Robinson. You're giving him a speed wide receiver like Anthony Miller. You're giving him a speed running back like Tariq Cohen. You're giving him a power back like David Montgomery. And you're giving him a decent O line and then a new rookie tight end Cole Kmet and tight end veteran tight end Jimmy Graham. I think he's put in the perfect place to succeed. And I think either way, the Bears are winning from this move because either way, you either have Nick Foles, who is going to help you guys win a championship, or you're going to have Mitchell Trubisky develop into the franchise QB that you guys were ridiculed for in 2017 in the 2017 draft. I mean, obviously everyone says, "Oh, he's drafted before um, Deshaun Watson and Patrick Mahomes, who are both, I agree, better than him." But I think bringing Nick Foles to mentor that mentality, because right now Trubisky, he's a good QB. He obviously overthrows the ball, but what he lacks the most is confidence. And I think Nick Foles can help him bring that confidence and winning mentality and like push him into saying, this is my franchise. No one can take this away from me. I think bringing in another QB to compete with him for the job. Obviously, Chase Daniel wasn't as good. He's very old. And I think now you're competing between Nick Foles and Mitchell Trubisky for the starting job. And obviously, declining the 50-year option was a really good idea because it kind of shows Trubisky, oh, if you don't perform, we're going to kick you out. And I think Nick Foles is like a perfect option for the Bears. And I think either way, you're getting a very good situation out of this. And I think the way they restructured his deal to 8 years, 24 million, I mean, 3 years, 24 million, and 20 million guaranteed. And I think they're not going to cut him because he's a good mentor for Trubisky either way, or he could help you win a championship. And I think this is the perfect move for Chicago. And I love, love, love this move by Pace and Nagy.
So I agree with what you say that this is a very bipolar decision where either Mitchell Trubisky comes out of this as a Chicago Bear franchise quarterback, newly um, he's now much better than he was before because he learned from Nick Foles. So now he's a more educated football quarterback for the Chicago Bears. Or now he's going to be on a new team next year, which I think is more likely, but I'll talk about that later. So I'm going to talk about Phillip Rivers now. Why I like Phillip Rivers is because he's a solid veteran quarterback for the Colts. And I really believe that looking at the Colts schedule and the performance of Jacoby Brissett with Phillip Rivers or any better quarterback than Jacoby Brissett, this would have been a playoff team. Okay, and I think he fits. I think there's a history between Frank Reich, the Colts head coach, and Phillip Rivers that can't be ignored, which is that Reich was the offensive coordinator of the San Diego Chargers when Phillip Rivers was there in 2014 and 2015, and that means they have past connections. They know each other's system, so he fits well in this Reich system. And overall, he's just a solid veteran quarterback, and I think the Colts needed a veteran presence in that locker room to lead this young team.
Um, I think the Phil Rivers move, I think it was like for the head coach's way of saying, "Oh, we need a win now," and we brought in a 38-year-old QB who has a presence in the locker
Absolutely.
room who could help you win that. He's like, "Oh, we have the pieces to basically be a winning franchise." And now you just needed a quarterback. I mean, Jacoby Brissett got it done last year a bit, but I think bringing in Philip Rivers is a good move for the Colts. And I think either way, if they went Rivers or another QB, I think they would have been a winning franchise in the future. But I think right now this move makes sense, and I like this move as well.
Absolutely agree. It's a win now move. It's a short contract for a guy in his late 30s. Some may even compare a Peyton Manning contract with like the Broncos did in 2012. But it's just a short-term contract. Get it done these next 2 seasons, Philip Rivers. Even develop the guy we bring in to replace you. Could be Jacob Eason. I like that pick. I think he fits well in the system. Could be anyone else, but I think Philip Rivers is there to help develop the next quarterback of the Colts and be the quarterback of the Colts right now.
Yeah. So moving on, we have a QB who will struggle in their respective teams. I mean, obviously, we have Adrian Sudol picking Nick Foles of Chicago, and I have Teddy Bridgewater of Carolina. So just because I'm the sole person, I'm going to go first and say Teddy Bridgewater is not going to perform at the level he did when Drew Brees was injured in New Orleans. Because I think when you look at the Saints, they had a better defense than Carolina has right now. I mean, you lost Kuechly, but you brought in Derek Brown. I mean, I think that's a very good move for them because you just replaced what they had. But I think Teddy Bridgewater, he had the pieces in New Orleans to really succeed. You had Michael Thomas, you had Alvin Kamara, you had a really good offensive line, you had a really good defense led by Cameron Jordan. And I think in Carolina, obviously you have Christian McCaffrey, but I think the wide receiver core isn't as strong as it was in New Orleans for him to perform at the same level. And I think because of that reason, I think he's going to struggle. He's a very good QB. I liked him in New Orleans, but I think the way that New Orleans has built their team, I think it's a very different situation than Carolina, and I don't see him succeeding. I mean, we look back on his like tape in on the Vikings and all that. He didn't perform at like a high level um when he didn't have the wide receivers to really like build him up and perform and help him perform at a high level. And that's why I think Teddy Bridgewater won't perform at the same level as the Saints. And that's why he's my quarterback who will struggle on their respective team, which is now the Carolina Panthers.
Yeah, so I really don't know what Foles is going to do next year. I think he will either be a boom or bust for the Bears. And even if he's a bust, maybe he develops Mitchell Trubisky. But for me, I think Nick Foles most likely will not do great because you saw how he was last season with the Jaguars when he was given that number one, the reins to the starting quarterback, and he just was not nice at all. Gardner Minshew completely outperformed him. And I think in a lot of ways, he's definitely shown flashes as a starting quarterback, but there's been no consistency. Obviously, a lot of times you want to bring up the Super Bowl 52 MVP and whatever, but that during that playoffs, I think a lot of people forget they almost didn't make it because of Nick Foles. And if you look back at the divisional round in that season, they played the Falcons as the number 1 seed. They hosted the 6 seed Falcons, I believe. And that was a very bad game for Nick Foles. There was no way that anyone expected him to play that well after that. And he did very well, so it's his credit to him. But I just don't think that is the quarterback Nick Foles is, what we saw in that NFC Championship game and Super Bowl. And I think if you look back also, 2016 season, specifically on the Kansas City Chiefs, Nick Foles was signed by that team and started a few games while Matt Nagy was the offensive coordinator, and it was not that amazing. He won a few games, but I think he just wasn't playing well in that system. So I think he might struggle the same in this time around.
Actually, I think when you look back on the Jacksonville tape, obviously he played week 1, but then he got injured, and then he came back right week 11 or something. I think when he came back, he performed at a decent level that the Bears need right now. I mean, they need a quarterback who they can count on right now. I mean, Mitchell Trubisky has shown he can't like lead them to win games. And I think Nick Foles, he had 296 yards and 2 touchdowns, 2 or 3 touchdowns, I believe. And that's kind of the production that Chicago needs. I mean, you have an amazing defense led by Khalil Mack, and now you bring in Robert Quinn. I think their defense is turning back a little bit to the 2018 season where Mitchell Trubisky was obviously the starter and they went 12-4. But I think now you think you have a consistent quarterback in Nick Foles who obviously has showed streaks that he can't be that quarterback. But I think overall, either way, Chicago's getting a quarterback that they need right now, either in mentoring Trubisky or being that person who they can count on to be consistent and help them win games.
Yeah, to add a quick point, I also think he will not. He will do bad because the thing was when he succeeded, he was obviously in Philadelphia. And the thing about that Philly team was that it was a great running team. And he benefited from the attention that linebackers and safeties gave to that running team. So he could. There was a lot of RPOs, run pass options that was happening there. The Philly offensive line was great. And the thing is, in Chicago, he really doesn't have that running back. I mean, yeah, David Montgomery, sure, but he's not like de facto running back. The Eagles in that season, they had LeGarrette Blount, and he actually performed really well. They also had J.J. They had like so many running backs. They had a whole community of running backs, and that was good. And I really don't think has a weapons. He really doesn't have the weapons yet. He has Allen Robinson, a very slept-on receiver. But I mean, it's too hard to tell. I mean, unless David Montgomery has like a breakout year, I don't think there's. I don't think Foles is the type of guy to put his team on his back and then carry them. He'll just perform if he has the weapons necessary. He'll just lead you through the game. He's not going to be like a Mahomes or Lamar Jackson or Russell Wilson who will win you the game because of his presence. So, yeah.
Yes, so quickly adding on, Nick Foles is a good quarterback. I'm not saying he's a bad quarterback. I think he needs weapons, and the Bears do have some weapons, but notably in Super Bowl 52, he had 3 reliable running backs, Jay Ajayi, LeGarrette Blount, Corey Clement, and then he had 2 really reliable wide receivers and tight ends. So receiving core was pretty reliable in Alshon Jeffrey, Torrey Smith, and Zach Ertz. These were really good wide receiver core. It fit Nick Foles, and I think it's going to be hard for Nick Foles, especially with no OTAs, to gain chemistry with these wide receivers in Chicago.
Yeah, either way, these QBs, they're decent moves for their team.
Yeah, they're going to do
just
fine.
have to wait and see. Yeah. And so, obviously, we have the quarterback who will succeed now. AJ picked Teddy Bridgewater. Sujal and I picked Tom Brady. And so, AJ, why don't you start because you're the only one who picked Teddy Bridgewater.
So I also think Tom Brady will succeed now. I just want to say that, but I feel like we a lot of people think Tom Brady already will succeed in Tampa Bay with all the weapons. So I actually want to focus on Teddy Bridgewater real quick because um, the system is. I think he played very well last year with the Saints. I think he went 4-1 as a starter there, which is pretty solid. Um, and he has past starting experience. He obviously started with the Vikings until his injury, and I think he's very ready for this opportunity. And the thing I like about the Panthers is that it's more of a college system. Obviously, they brought in Matt Rule and Joe Brady as the offensive coordinator, and I think a simpler college system might actually fit his strengths better than a more complex NFL system like he had with Sean Payton or whoever, like in Minnesota with Mike Zimmer. So I think he'll actually very much benefit from this more simple system.
Oh yeah, Teddy Bridgewater. He definitely has the potential to be succeed now, but I'm gonna go with the obvious choice here and go with Tom Brady for Tampa Bay. I mean, obviously, first you have the weapons. You have Evans, Godwin, you have Gronk, and their offensive line is actually pretty underrated. They obviously picked up Tristan Wirfs. They already have Ellie Marpet, Donovan Jones, those type of guys, and their offensive line can be reliable. And then they picked up a running back named Keyshawn Vaughn, and I'm really excited for him because he can be a pass catcher sort of guy, and I feel like that will help take the pressure off Brady. He will have at least a serviceable running back. So yeah, and their defense is pretty underrated. They picked up Antoine Winfield Jr. He's one of my
Yeah.
favorite safety prospects. And their linebacker core, Levante David, pretty good. Then they have Vita Vea in the defensive line. So yeah, their defense can. I think the defense will. It's nowhere near the Patriots' defense last year, but the offense is amazing. His weapons are amazing. The offensive line is serviceable. It's competent. He will have enough time to throw the ball, and the defense is also serviceable and competent. So I think he'll succeed right now.
Yeah, I mean, obviously Tom Brady, he's the GOAT, six rings. And I think you can never count him out, even if he's 42. He'll always, I mean, the Patriots made the playoffs last year, and obviously they lost to the Titans. But I think Tom Brady is a decent QB right now, and I think with all the weapons, he can succeed now. So we have a quarterback who'll succeed in the future. All of us picked James Winston of the Saints. And so basically, you can never go wrong with James Winston. I mean, he's being mentored by Drew Brees. I mean, he has all the weapons he needs to be successful in the future. He has Michael Thomas. He has Taysom Hill. He has Alvin Kamara, and all those players who can help him succeed. And I think taking over for Drew Brees is like something that every quarterback wants to do because Drew Brees is kind of like a very good mentor for young quarterbacks, and I think James Winston will benefit from that and be successful in the future. And if you guys want to add anything,
Yes, so for me, Jameis Winston, I think it's important for him to just take a step back from being that starter. Obviously, 30 interceptions last season, 30 touchdowns also, but you still don't want 30 interceptions. And I think that he's taking a step back, and this will benefit him a lot to learn from Drew Brees. And
yeah,
I think his interception problem is turning the ball over. It can easily be fixed with coaching. And I do think he's poised, if he plays well and shows he's learning and developing, he will inherit the Saints from Drew Brees.
yeah,
And one other thing is that an interesting story is that he changed his number from number 3 to number 2. And whether I know this is like a weird conspiracy, but I think this is also him redefining himself as a player. He doesn't want to be known as Jameis Winston number 3. He's now redefining himself. New jersey, new uniform. Let me come and play my game. Let me show this franchise that I can lead them in the future.
yeah. I mean, I love it. I mean, you have Sean Payton, one of the best coaches in the league, who can help develop him as well. I mean, he's in a perfect place for him for either in his career and taking over the reins for Drew Brees. And so now we move on to conspiracy, like you just said. And so we have the conspiracy of the week. Did the Indianapolis Colts tank for Andrew Luck in 2012? So, any of you guys have any like opinions or talks
So
about this?
I was the one who researched this topic, and I did find a few things that just didn't seem right in my opinion. So, um, obviously, 2011 season was the Colts tanking season, but in 2010 they were 10-6, and I don't know how a team goes from 10-6 to 2-14 that rapidly. So I found that a little suspicious. Um, I think the second thing I want to say is Peyton Manning, at the time, he had a pretty big contract with the Colts. Obviously, he was there because he was their franchise quarterback for so long. And the release of Peyton Manning was going to happen. Everyone knew his neck injury. They didn't think he would be able to play again. Obviously, we know he did. He was able to. And I think also, um, even if they didn't tank, they could have signed a veteran quarterback available like Carson Palmer. And yeah, Palmer was 33 years old, but I'm sure they would have been happy to have him. But I think in a lot of ways, um, they really were looking for luck once they realized Peyton Manning was not going to be there long term, and they needed a solution. So I think Luck was a generational prospect, similar to Peyton Manning at his time. A lot of conspiracy around Andrew Luck possibly entering the 2011 draft a year before. He would have been the number one pick over Cam Newton. And so yeah, so I think he was a generational prospect. Now another odd occurrence I saw with this team was they went 0-13 in their first 13 games. Now that can happen with the team, but I don't think the Colts team was that bad to go 0-13. They had pretty solid offense besides quarterback. I think they went through a few quarterbacks, but I still think this team could have won a few more games. And even more suspicious, I feel like they won two of their last three games. Okay, because they went 2-14. I think they won two of their last three games to not look suspicious, and for the pride of not going 0-16. But I think it is very suspicious that they were losing this many games when they still were a decent team besides the quarterback position. So, what do you guys think about this whole story?
Yeah, I mean, it's obviously very shady, and I think um, there's like no way to basically know, but there's evidence to basically suggest that. And I think you dropped Andrew Luck, and I think obviously all that he's shown the Colts in his 7, 8 years of playing, they've paid off. But I don't know, like the evidence that basically suggests that they tanked for him is kind of like enough for us to conclude that they may have tanked for Andrew Luck. And obviously, it's a conspiracy, but like I think they tanked for Andrew Luck. I mean, obviously, as AJ said, you don't go 0-13 in your first 13 games unless you're the Browns a couple years ago. So, yeah.
Even the
So,
Browns
yeah.
might have been tanking for Myles Garrett, but that's a completely different thing. And
Yeah.
I feel like at its time, pretty this was pretty far back in the past. Obviously, it doesn't seem like it now, but 2011 was pretty far back. But Andrew Luck was the whole idea of tanking, I guess, wasn't really a thing. Most teams didn't think about tanking so much. Now, recently, I feel like it's really come up where like quarterbacks like Tua, like the whole Miami Dolphins tanking for Tua. Yeah, in the end they got him at fifth overall, but obviously no one knew Joe Burrow would exist, so it was public consensus that Tua Tagovailoa would have been the first overall pick in the 2020 NFL draft if Joe Burrow wasn't there. So I think in a lot of ways this whole tanking thing was actually definitely a new concept and wasn't explored at the time. And this story actually didn't come up until recently, this whole theory, because until the Tua tanking thing. And I think now this year, we may see a few teams tanking for another quarterback in next year's draft in Trevor Lawrence. So I think that's going to be interesting to watch.
Yeah. And so we have a headline of the week. It's related to sports and the coronavirus, and patients across the nation is lowering. And obviously, we have it related to sports canceling all the seasons. And I think Shujal's going to go more in depth about like how its effect on sports and fans across the globe.
Yeah, we already know how the coronavirus is impacting the nation outside of sports. I mean, obviously, I think every state in the United States is going through like a shutdown. things are pretty bad. We're preparing for a second wave. And also, I wanted to thank all the first line responders out there. I mean, like they're putting their lives on the line to help fight this coronavirus cause. So like, I just wanted to thank them. And to relate this coronavirus thing to sports, the NFL isn't really that affected by coronavirus. Obviously, like the draft didn't take place in Vegas. It happened online, but the NFL they're already planning to reopen their facilities on May 19th, so the team can get together and they'll be able to develop chemistry. Fans of the season is they are planning to start the season on time, September 10th, and they've already prepped for any possible like having fewer fans available or having no fans available. And obviously it depends on each state because like each state is going through like different. They have different amount of like for example New York, it's like going through a pretty bad case of coronavirus, but other states are not as bad. So obviously the stadiums and when they open, they're gonna have to be in accordance with the state policy. But the NFL is planning to have OTA a training camp and the season start on time. However, the NBA is severely getting affected by this. Obviously, we know that the season got suspended, and then another bad thing about this is that now that there's no more revenue coming in from the games, the salary cap numbers might go down a lot. So for teams potentially wanting to re-sign their free agents or make a move make a move or trade for like a for a star, Bradley Beal, Giannis potentially in the next few years. It's gonna be tough. And you obviously have the draft and the draft lottery that was pushed back. If the season was to end, that means you'd already have the lottery set. But then if the season was to continue, potentially the top 5 teams in the lottery could have changed. So that this also has a major impact on draft plans. And the thing about coronavirus is, let's just say, obviously we have the first wave right now, but then once the second wave comes back up, and if any sports players get affected, then the entire league's gonna have to shut down again. So all sports is they're proceeding very, very cautiously with this because they're trying to avoid anything of that scenario. Obviously, when workers, any team member, staff, coach, general manager, when they enter the building, they're gonna have their temperature checked, and I believe it's if their temperature is higher than 100.4 degrees, they're gonna be sent back home and tested. So the entire sports nation is they're proceeding very, very cautiously with this. So we really can't tell what's going to happen until we get like until we get like further developments about how the coronavirus is affecting sports, like if the amount of people affected by coronavirus is going down or up. So we're still in a gray area. We really don't know what's going to happen in the next few months. So yeah.
Adding on to that, I feel like obviously the NFL schedule recently released an interesting comment from Gavin Newsom saying that he doesn't expect things to open up until a vaccine is made, which is a very valid point. So we might not get sports until a vaccine is made, which would be very, very far down the line. And obviously, maybe it's the governor's of that state's choice, whether he wants to host games or not, open games. And the whole no fans concept could work, but you're still having a lot of players out there sweating. That's still fluids from the body, so it still could transfer the disease. And going back to the NFL scheduling, there are contingency plans around the coronavirus. One including that each team has a bye week. Okay, so they get to not play that week. So teams share bye weeks with their week 2 opponent, and what that makes it possible to do is to take a block of weeks in the beginning of the season, however long it has to be delayed. So say the NFL season won't be able to start until week 9. They can now move weeks 1 through 8 below week 17, and they can play those games later, and it wouldn't affect anything because the team's buys line up with their week 2 opponent, which makes it so there's no messed up schedule. It's just like reordering the schedule, and it's safe to reorder the schedule in that case.
Yeah. Last point. I know Sujal thanked the first responders, but I think another person we should thank, or the NFL fans should thank, is Roger Goodell. I mean, Roger Goodell, he's like putting the league over himself. I mean, he lowered his salary to zero, to basically nothing, and so I think just his initiative of doing that is something that everyone should look into and like applaud him for, because I mean, obviously the NBA is suffering from this. They're losing revenue and players aren't getting their pay and all that. But I think Roger Goodell, he's putting the league over himself and his salary. And I think that's something that's really um a good part on him. And I think coronavirus, it should end soon, but like obviously there's contingencies, as AJ said, and I think one way you can pass the time during this time is watching our podcast. And so we have another one next Saturday. And so if you have any questions, concerns, compliments, or constructive criticism, we left our email over here. So shoot us an email and we'll respond to you. And obviously, next week we're going to be going over the schedules and other parts of that. We're going to be playing a game, other three of us, and I think it's going to be a fun time and we can get through this together.
Yeah,
So
and
I just want
NFL fans, be ready as we're gonna actually start doing our week by week predictions for the NFL season. Even if it doesn't happen, we still want to maybe think about what could happen as far as who's going to win certain games, what the standings are going to look like after week 1, week 2, and we're just going to use this time to talk about anything related to the real world and sports, and we're just going to have fun while doing this podcast.
Yeah. Another thing that's really fun that we're going to be doing next week is analyzing different players around the league. And I think AJ, Sujong, and they're going to be going over number one pick Joe Burrow. So I think you guys should come and learn about Joe Burrow's game and how his game can translate to the NFL. Thanks for listening. As usual, shoot us a message, and we'll see you next Saturday.